Back again on the Sports Zone. I am Mike Aglialoro. So earlier this week, myself, Tom Lumbo, Jake Dixon, Aaron Hadasme, the newest member of the Sports Zone family, and Jay Rosky, we sent some emails to each other and we decided to do Sports Zone's version, the second annual NFL mock draft for the 2014 season. And on Tuesday, Jake also concluded his 2014 NFL draft preview. He did every position possible, and then he did his sleepers on Tuesday. So today, I decided it's time to finally finish this series, looking division by division at all the teams' improvements that they have made thus far this offseason, and the needs that they still have yet to fill as we head into the NFL draft. And first, we're going to look at the AFC West. We're going to start at the bottom of the division. We're going to look at the Oakland Raiders. The Raiders actually came into the free agency period among the league leaders in terms of most available cap space. And then they promptly began the free agency period by losing arguably two of their most talented young players in the tackle Jared Veldheer, who went to the Arizona Cardinals, and the defensive end Lamar Houston, who started the period off by signing with the Chicago Bears. They also wound up losing cornerback Tracy Porter, running back Rashad Jennings, and wide receiver Jacoby Ford. Now, they did wind up cutting quarterback Terrell Pryor a couple weeks ago, once deemed as their quarterback of the future. They let him go after they acquired Matt Schaub for the Houston Texans, who really couldn't wait to get rid of him coming off of his terrible season. Now, despite the fact that they lost Lamar Houston and Jared Veldheer, they actually were able to make very good use of that cap space, and they brought in an extreme veteran presence to this roster. Of course, the big ones that you heard a lot about is they took the jettison Justin Tuck and Lamar Woodley, formerly of the Giants and the Steelers. They did sign former Texans defensive end Antonio Smith, and they heavily upgraded their secondary, bringing in former 49ers Terrell Brown and Carlos Rogers at the cornerback position, and they also brought in Phillip Adams, formerly of Seattle, to cover the slot receiver. The improvements they made on the offensive line, they brought in former Jet Austin Howard, they brought in former Buccaneer Donald Penn, and former Giant Kevin Booth. These aren't great additions, they're solid ones. They did wind up losing their best player on either side of the line, but they went with a depth approach and a veteran approach to try to replace both of them. So we're going to see if that winds up working out. They did wind up adding a really good wide receiver in James Jones. At least he definitely looked good over the last few years with Aaron Rodgers throwing to him. We'll see how he does with Matt Schaub. So the Raiders enter the draft having Schaub for this coming season, but they're not set at quarterback for the future. They could use a tight end or a wide receiver because James Jones and Denarius Moore are decent wide receivers. Neither one of them is really a true number one wide receiver. You need some more options to go there with those two. And they definitely need some front seven help. They got a lot of veterans, like I said. They need to add some youth. Their head coach was recently quoted as saying that he believes they really only have two foundation players, one of them being Mikael Rivera, the tight end, and the linebacker C.O. Moore. So you need some youth on that defensive front. And while they improved their cornerback situation, definitely, like I said, added some depth, they don't really have anything at safety, and they could definitely use some young legs at that position. We're going to move to the San Diego Chargers, who snuck into the playoffs last season. They haven't really made that many moves thus far. They let go of a lot of guys who really disappointed over the last couple of years in an effort to sign the young linebacker Donald Butler. They also re-signed the guard Chad Reinhardt, and they added Donald Brown, the running back, to tandem with Ryan Matthews and Danny Woodhead. And they brought in Brandon G., a cornerback formerly of the Cincinnati Bengals. And like I said, these are really the only moves they've made thus far. Their big improvements in their eyes will be the return to health of Melvin Ingram and Dwight Freeney on that front seven. They get those two back, it could be a game changer. Their major weakness on defense is the cornerbacks. If you saw the mock draft we did, I actually selected Kyle Fuller, the cornerback, to address this need. You look at other needs they have, they need another wide receiver to play alongside Keenan Allen, who had a great rookie season last year and looks like he has a bright future ahead of him if he has some help on the other side. And the other major improvement I would make or look for them to make as they head into the draft is the right side of the offensive line, particularly the guard position. We're going to move to the Kansas City Chiefs, who arguably lost more in terms of players out of any team in this division. They are losing over 6,000 snaps off their offensive line, seeing John Asamoah, Brandon Albert, and Jeff Schwartz leave this offseason. And they also lost Tyson Jackson along the defensive line, Akeem Jordan from the linebacking core, and the secondary sustained heavy losses with Kendrick Smith and Quentin Demps, both safeties, leaving, and they cut Dunta Robinson, the cornerback. They also lost he was always supposed to be their Tavon Austin and Percy Harvin type, but Dexter McCluster never really panned out for them. They let him go to Tennessee this offseason. They did wind up adding an offensive lineman in Jeff Linkenbach, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts, and they brought in a defensive lineman from Oakland, Vance Walker. But those are really the only additions they have made thus far. Now, while they did lose a lot in terms of veteran presence on that offensive line, the plan for Andy Reid was always to go with youth on that line anyway. They do have 3 foundation pieces in right tackle Donald Stevenson, left guard Jeff Allen, and last year's first overall pick, the left tackle Eric Fisher. Look for them to complete that overhaul in the draft at some point. I do expect them to take a wide receiver or a tight end simply because Dwayne Bowe and Donnie Avery are not number 1 wide receivers. Bowe may be paid like one. Neither one of them are legitimate wide receivers. Avery is a 3 at best. They need a legitimate weapon there for Alex Smith because Jamal Charles is not lasting forever. They do need some depth on that front 7. And like I said, they lost a lot at safety. That's a position I look for them to at least try to add some depth to. They do have Eric Berry, so they're not starving there, but I would look for them to add a little bit of depth in that secondary. Last team we're going to talk about is the team that made the Super Bowl last year and then got their behinds handed to them, the Denver Broncos. So the Broncos came into this offseason needing to add a ton on defense. And while they did part ways with Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie from the secondary, they brought in Aqib Talib from the rival New England Patriots and the best safety on the market in TJ Ward from the Cleveland Browns. And they took advantage of the Dallas Cowboys' folly, and they brought in DeMarcus Ware. They had no problem letting go of a lot of players on that front 7, including defensive end Robert Ayers, linebacker or defensive end Wesley Woodward. They let go of their kick returner who had set all kinds of records, Trenton Holiday. He signed with the Giants. And they also lost defensive end Sean Phillips. On the offensive side, they parted ways with lineman Zane Beadles, who went to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they didn't even offer Eric Decker a contract. They just let him walk to the New York Jets. They brought in Emmanuel Sanders to replace him, and they did add a veteran center in Will Montgomery, formerly of the Washington Redskins. But they're another team. Their big additions are going to come back from the guys they get back off of injury. Ryan Clady, the left tackle, missed the entire season last year. Von Miller and the defensive lineman Derek Wolfe and Kevin Vickerson all were gone by the time they made the Super Bowl with Seattle, and they are getting safety Raheem Moore back as well. So these are guys returning that Denver is basically looking at as free agent acquisitions. So as they enter the draft, as much as, like I said, they're getting the reinforcement on the offensive line, I look for them to add some youth. Clady's still getting up there in years, so they definitely could use some fresh legs to protect Peyton. And on the defense, I look for a lot of youth on that front 7. Like I said, they addressed their secondary with guys like Talib and TJ Ward, but they need a lot more on that front 7. Von Miller is great, but he needs some help. That's going to do it for the AFC West. Just to recap, Oakland still at the bottom, San Diego in third, Kansas City a far distant second to the Denver Broncos, still in first place. Like I said earlier, make sure you check out SportsZone's 2014 mock draft, our second annual mock draft with Jake Dixon, Aaron Harasmi, the newest member of the SportsZone family. Tom Lembo, Jay Rovsky picking for the Vikings, and myself. We got the last of Jake Dixon's 2014 NFL Draft preview. He did the quarterbacks and the wide receivers earlier this week. He finishes up with 5 late-round sleepers you can see going on day 3 who could have a big impact this season. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at WeAreSportsZone. Send us any questions and comments you may have. Thanks for watching, everybody. For This is SportsZone, I am Mike Aglialoro. We'll see you next time with the NFC West.